and welcome to In the District. Our guest today is New York State Senator Nathalia Fernandez from State Senate District 34. We will get up to date with what's happening in her district. That includes City Island, BronxNet, Pelham Bay, Castle Hill, and Parkchester, among other neighborhoods. I am Javier Gómez. Senator Fernandez, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I never had a chance to interview you in depth, at least I don't think I recall, so this is very exciting.
If we haven't, then it must have been a while or it never happened.
Or on the street, or some
Or on
event.
the street, on the go, all that, yeah.
Senator, something interesting about your district, 34. It is a very geographically, ethnically, and economically diverse district.
Oh, yes.
It includes parts of the East Bronx and also Lower Westchester County, New Rochelle area. Please tell me about that and the challenges of working on such a diverse district.
Yes, well, it's very diverse and very large, very big. It's the biggest geographical Senate district of the Bronx, in its portion of the Bronx, but then it also has Westchester County, the southern half of New Rochelle with Pelham and Pelham Manor. And I mean, aside from just the gas that I spend, traveling up and down 95, getting around, there's a lot of different community dynamics to learn, to understand, to address differently. That has been a little bit of a challenge, but it really has been great, assessing the challenges and succeeding in some solutions.
These are very different communities in terms of even what they look like. For example, you have the high-rise buildings, multifamily units in Parkchester, but then you also have some of the more working-class houses in the Soundview, Castle Hill area. But then you have the more beautiful mansions of Country Club. And then you get right in the middle, Orchard Beach, Pelham Bay Park, the largest park in all of New York City. And then you get into New Rochelle, that is a completely different vibe.
Well, New Rochelle actually has a lot of similar vibes to parts of the Bronx. I mean, I guess I could compare to some areas of Castle Hill, but then also some areas like Country Club. So it's its own like microcosm of some of the areas in the Bronx part. But its diversity is, always exciting to see, to be a part of, to embrace, to support, to uplift. And then sometimes it, could be a challenge in just creating the general understanding, because what might work for one area of the district may not work for another area. So when I do something or decide to do something, I want to make sure that everyone understands why I did it and give the picture of what my district is and why I need to take some positions to help people.
In such a broad area, are there any issues or themes that kind of apply across the board?
As generic as this sounds, quality of life is something that I think everybody is always looking for. And what does that mean? Clean streets, the basics of just having the garbage picked up on time, making sure that our streets aren't littered like that our parks are clean. So as we get into summer and it's already starting, noise and people playing their music out there, I think every part of the district has experienced, some of those disruptions. So how do we address it with the different precincts, the different partners? Even in Pelham and New Rochelle, we deal with that. So it's a lot of just like trying to get to addressing the issue as it happens, when it happens. I pride myself in always being there for the community, showing up when I need to, when I don't need to, being accessible and responsive. And again, just trying to work with our partners immediately to get immediate results.
You started to highlight certain community issues, and it's interesting because these are issues that we don't often hear about in media. And this brings me to the importance of community media. And I know there's this legislation pending at the state capitol about the Community Media Reinvestment Act. Do you have any thoughts about this, and where does the legislation stand these days as we are about to possibly wrap the legislative session for 2024?
Yes, well, it is a new bill. I think it was just introduced, if not this session, within this term. So last session it was in existence and being introduced. People were still learning about it. I did not get involved in it did not make it into the budget this year, but in my opinion, it should have. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I love and appreciate our local media. And in a time where we're battling, AI that's creating fake media, fake news, like actual fake news, it's really important that we give the resources and sustain our local media outlets so they can highlight our community for what we see and know. Because, like, people have cable, they have Channel 4, Channel 5, but it's always talking about news in New York City or news, throughout the state, throughout the world. We need to know what's happening in our backyard, on our block, within our local hospitals, what's happening that's going to affect me directly as much as I need to know what's happening on the 5 o'clock news.
I think you were talking off camera before we started in the green room about how the entire media landscape is changing, and that's one of the difficulties of the legislation. How to figure this out as this keeps moving forward.
Yes, and it's moving faster than ever. So, the learning curve is constant and always looping, but the landscape of media, yes, has improved very fast. That some parts of the state have not been able to catch up. Like, some parts of the state still doesn't have broadband for Wi-Fi purposes. And in a time and place where we can do a whole news show from our phone, we need to make sure that we can have that accessible to the regular neighbor, upstate, downstate, wherever. So it's a constant chase to make sure that we are aware of the new tools, are aware of, what other outlets are using, and to make sure that our local media has the same tools so we can not only just compete, but again, push our voices out there.
You have multiple committee assignments within the state Senate, and one of those is chairperson of the Alcoholism and Substance Use Disorders Committee. I know you've been very vocal about the issues with substance abuse, specifically the opioids crisis. What's happening with this? How can we stop this from happening? The opioids crisis.
Yes, it really is a crisis right now. I did lead a letter asking the governor to declare state of emergency because the rate as to which people are overdosing every day, maybe surviving, unfortunately, maybe not, and are dying is too extreme. We're seeing our young people, our teens, our youth, getting involved in opioids younger and sooner than before. So to have a real grasp on the emergency that it is, we need to take measures in so many different parts. The opioid addiction, we know fentanyl has been put out there. Fentanyl is all over the streets. It's in every drug supply. In some of the locations that we have in drop-in centers and respite centers, they have drug checking machines. And once a week, they're able to check the drugs that, people are using, bought on the street. And we're seeing that fentanyl is in every single batch. And, one thing in the budget that we didn't allow to happen because it's been proven since like the first Rockefeller drug law has been put in that criminalizing the use of drugs is not going to stop it. In 2012, we did schedule fentanyl when we found it to be in 2% of the drug supply out there. And since scheduling it, making it illegal and punishable by jail, it's only increased. It's in like 57% of the drug supply. So criminalizing use is not helping. But what does help is harm reduction. What does help is early intervention, early education. I'm a DARE kid. I had DARE in, 5th grade. And that was my first introduction to, the hard drugs and the unfortunate aftermath of what could happen to somebody if they really fall into deep addiction and get to that rock bottom, or how it could just be an addiction that you don't realize is an addiction, like alcoholism. Alcoholism is still the number one addiction in the state. As much as we have the opioid epidemic and we see deaths happening, alcoholism is long-term deaths happening. And the death rates that are because of alcoholism still remain very high. But because it's a social, substance, people don't realize that there might be a problem in their usage. So there's so many, aspects to look at, and really pushing for legislation that would help people where they are. And that's at all levels. The talk of OPCs, overdose prevention centers, some people are very much against it because how could you allow someone to use their illegal drugs in a safe place? But those are the people that need that support to stay alive. That's the biggest purpose of this, to keep people alive so then they can get better. So then they can step onto that path of recovery and continue and stay. And the supportive services during that path of recovery, making sure that they have housing, making sure that they're getting counseling, mental health services, because substance use disorder is most of the time derived from a mental health crisis. And people ask, why would anyone want to or even try a substance. And majority of the time, it's because of trauma in life, whether it was an attack, whether it was psychological trauma, whether it was a crazy experience. Like, people are still hurting, in many different ways in this life. And that trauma could feed into a way to heal yourself because of the stigma that exists, and being afraid to get help, that it could then, go awry and they have then an addiction.
You have been also very vocal about the issues with vaping.
Yes. So vaping, as I mentioned, preventative measures and education at a younger age, vaping has become the new cool thing for our young kids. And the first child, 17 years old, to ever die was a Bronx student because of extensive vaping. And we addressed it years ago, not too long, but just a few years ago, we addressed it knowing that these companies were directly targeting to our young people with fruity flavors.
Very colorful wrappings.
Yes, and they even have vapes that look like highlighter school supplies because they want the kids to be addicted to this, so then they have lifelong customers. So it's really a strategic, marketing plan that we're trying to address right away. This year, there was legislation introduced that I support to ban the marketing, creation, and sale of the school supply looking vapes. Those aren't flavored. We did ban the flavored ones because we know that kids like the bubblegum flavor. But the problem is enforcement. There's still so many stores right now here across the street, and all over the state that are still selling it, and there's no enforcement to, put the penalties if you're selling illegal products.
You're currently the state senator for District 34, but before that, you were assembly member for District 80, I think?
80, yes. The greatest 80th, as I called it.
I'm a little puzzled. Is it different to be within the legislative chamber as an assembly person and a senator? Is there a difference between both posts?
Yes, and being a chair, I think, is the biggest difference. In, the Senate, there's less members, so every member in the majority is almost guaranteed to be a chair of a committee, and the work that comes with it, the amount of learning that I imposed on myself. I made sure I tried to learn everything and anything about this issue, and the work being done and the work needed to be done, and the funding that we have and don't have, because I know it's so important. People's lives are literally at stake here, and if we're not giving the proper assistance where needed, not only with just the providers to be able to do the work and have the support for the work, but also making sure that the public, knows that the help is here, that they don't feel shamed again into stepping into those doors and to speaking about, their issues. So the workload, I think, is the biggest difference because, again, the meetings, the one-on-ones with central staff, going through every part of that budget section, and understanding how it intertwines with, other health budget elements when it comes to Department of Aging, Department of Developmental Disabilities, mental health. It feels like a lot.
The issue with the migrant crisis, how has it impacted your neighborhoods, if in any way?
Well, certainly an increase in our schools. We've gotten the numbers in the schools in my district. Some areas have seen an increase in students that are here now. So with more students, you do get more funding. But, then it's a challenge on the school to now have to manage more students, and the students that have different needs too. Like knowing, again, the trauma that a student probably went through traveling, however they traveled into this country, that sits with them, that's hard to break through, in a brand new classroom. So making sure that we have language access and that the teachers are able to speak to the kids is a big challenge. But, I really hope that we see some action in getting work permits because, as my parents did, I'm a daughter of immigrants, my father from Cuba, my mother from Colombia. They came to this country to build a better life for themselves and their children. And that's why everyone comes to this country, to achieve that opportunity, the American dream, as we love. So the ability to work and to prosper and to make something for your family, your name, is what everyone wants. And we need to get these work permits in order and available so these families can work, pay taxes, and become just stable members of the community. And, we do see an increase of people trying everything to get some sort of resource, to have money for the family. And we just want to make sure that they have good, safe jobs.
More with State Senator Nathalia Fernandez after the break.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
Welcome back. We are in the district. Today we're talking with Nathalia Fernandez, who represents New York Senate District 34. Senator, we've spoken about a lot of issues, but now let's talk a little bit about you. You mentioned your parents. How did growing up from a migrant family impact you?
Well, I mean, there's that joke that's long known, immigrants are the hardest workers. And I think we are. My father is the hardest working man that I've ever met, and still, to this day. And I think I mentioned it before, like in my work ethic is what I pride myself on, making sure I'm taking that extra step every single time, just so we know that efforts were made and, wherever we land until the next day when we pick it up again. So, that drive of making sure you're working, you're producing, you're succeeding in little ways, big ways, I think is within all of us, every immigrant family. But it's interesting because with my mother, I just spoke about her recently. I was on a panel with sorority sisters of Chi Epsilon Sigma last week, and it was a panel of women of government and leadership. Women of color in leadership. And, one common topic was imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome, I could say I, was affected by it early on in my career as just like a volunteer and a staffer, like afraid to ask a question. And part of that too was, I think, impacted maybe like in an immigrant family mindset that like, don't disrupt, just assimilate, And I've learned that just assimilating is not going to take you anywhere. You're just continuing the same patterns that society expects of you. And as we've seen in history, people have spoken up. Women are now in leadership. We vote, we fight, we run for office. And I think that was something that was kind of instilled in me, like, don't make a scene, don't disrupt, just go along to get along. But being in this position now, you have to disrupt, you have to speak up, you have to present different ideas, and you have to work towards compromising solutions or finding that compromise for a solution to make sure that, we're delivering something in the times that everybody wants everything.
Is that what inspired you to get into politics and public service? Or part of it?
A little bit. I just love people. So I always enjoyed, just going to any place and talking to anyone around me. Like my mom always laughed when I was like 5 years old and outside the house saying hi to the neighbors. And she's like, stop talking to strangers. And now this is what I do every 2 years, talk to strangers. Like, do you know who I am? I'm here. I'm trying to help you. If you didn't know who your senator is, I'm your senator. I swear it was an accident. I never thought that politics would be what I wanted to do. I did have an idea that I would get into advertising because I liked art. I was always a creative, director mind in my college years. So I was like, let me try to get into advertising or public relations so I can promote, create, show the best of people and products and whatever. And, trying to find a job there and also just working lightly in my community, like helping out here and there. That's when I discovered that there was a candidate running. At the time, it was Mark Jonai for state assembly, the first Albanian ever elected. And I joined his campaign. And from there, I just realized, wow, I can do all these things that I like and want to do for my neighborhood groups, for my neighbors. And it just kind of just snowballed into, now advocating for law that would help my neighbors, the things that they don't know that needs to happen so their lives can be easier. And sharing information. Like I call myself a bridge sometimes because I want to bring people to the next step in their life. I want to help them understand how they can get someplace. And making those connections of other community partners, resources, information is something that I just like to do.
Who are your inspirations or role models?
Oh my goodness, my role models. we always love Justice Sonia Sotomayor. She's a Latina. She's from the Bronx. She's made it there in the top of like one of our governmental branches. And reading more into her story has just always been inspiring. Like, have you read her book?
Mhm.
Her storybook. I swear, the first time I read that book, I was reading to a classroom of students, and it got me. I started to cry
very
reading the
inspiring.
book. Yes, because I felt like that connection, especially in the time when she was saying how her mother was proud of her. Look at her daughter. Like, I had that moment play in my head when I first ran for office. So she certainly is a local leader, but my mother is one of my biggest inspirations. Always going against the grain, but trying to help people in the softest ways. And I feel like I'm continuing that, but doing so obviously in a bigger scale in a legislative way.
What moves you, Senator?
I like to see people happy. I really like to see, those moments of joy, whether like because the sprinkler got turned on, that joy because it's so hot outside, or, that moment when, yes, meaningful legislation was finally passed and you see, the size of relief on my colleagues and myself, knowing that this is going to impact so many people. Like, it's just that joy. You got to chase the joy. So again, helping people brings me joy, and to see the joy that's brought to them just because they got the phone call answered, or they actually got, the real help they needed to stay in their home.
A small gesture can transform someone's life in ways that are unimaginable. Senator, I'm wondering, in your spare time, what are your hobbies?
Well, I picked up a hobby that I used to have years ago, but in the last decade of life, I've been so busy. But now I've finally been able to take it up again, tap dancing.
Tap dancing.
Tap dancing, yes. I was a dancer growing up. I did tap, jazz, ballet, and everything. But, as soon as high school was over, I just never pursued it and went into everything else. But in talking about it lately, my family got me tap shoes for Christmas, and now I'm taking tap classes again.
I'm a tap dancer too. A very bad one, because I don't know how to count and I don't know how to weight shift. Those are essential skills for tap. Where do you study? And you have Capicio shoes?
I have block shoes.
Oh.
Yes, block shoes. Right now, I'm just going to the Broadway Dance Center. It's in Manhattan. I'm looking for classes in the Bronx because we do have a lot of dance studios here. So I want to definitely support one of my local dance studios in the Bronx. But just to start to get my groove back, I visited the Broadway Dance Center in Midtown, which has a whole schedule of different
It's
classes.
fantastic. I go to Broadway Dance Center. I go to Steps on Broadway as well. Tap at all levels. I'm at the very beginners. What level are you?
I would say advanced beginner. Like, I really picked it up right away. But I like the Broadway tap because there's contemporary tap,
Yes,
where you're
and jazz.
and jazz, where you're making beats, whatever. But then with Broadway tap, it's very precise sound, but then also like controlled movements, and I just love the chorus line. So
Those are phenomenal
Yeah.
schools, and you pay by class, so you don't have to sign up.
$25 a class is not bad.
Perfect. Senator, going back to your district before we wrap for today, what are your legislative priorities from this moment on?
From this moment on, I have some bills that I would like to see fulfilled, completed, passed in both houses, and ultimately signed by the governor. Some related to the committee. I have a bill to remove copays when someone is getting substance use services, finishes those services, needs to continue into mental health services. There's a copay barrier that right now people are facing. And someone at whatever level of their life may not be able to afford the $40, $20 to get their mental health counseling, and decide not to, and then they just don't get the continued help and they might relapse. So removing that barrier of copays is something I want to see done. Also allowing these providers to be able to hire peer advocates through their Medicaid, because they do, reimburse a lot within their office and their systems, but they can't reimburse peer supporters. And who are they? These are people that were once addicted, that are now sober, that are now coaches, that are now, guidance, giving guidance to those in that part of their journey. And more times than none, those are the people that really do influence and inspire those suffering to take those steps of change. I did it too. You can do it. So we really want to make these these services hit home, and talking to somebody, working with somebody that knows your struggle, has been through your struggle, has been the best way to see recovery succeed. I also have some bills related to sexual assault. We have a bill that has passed in the Senate for a number of years. It hasn't passed in the Assembly yet. It's to close the loophole, voluntary intoxication exclusion. Right now, if somebody were to have a drink and maybe they had too many drinks and somebody pursues them, takes advantage of them, assaults them, rapes them, whatever, the victim who had been assaulted now can't defend themselves to an extent that other states are able to because they had a drink. It was a voluntary intoxication, so you are not technically mentally incapacitated. And that has blocked so many cases and victims from finding justice on their attacker, knowing that this person took advantage that they were drunk or, that's what it is. They have, not been able to get justice. So we want to see that exclusion removed and repealed so that, definition doesn't stop cases from getting justice.
I know because of the committees that you are assigned to, you're also involved in the cannabis rollout.
Yes, so
And
I am
also,
on the
I think bail
committee.
reform, if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, bail reform, we amended last year. We gave judges further discretion. The law always gave judges discretion, but we gave them further. And right now, bail reform, as it's been, I don't know the exact numbers, but a very high percentage of anyone arrested is returning to the courts to get their due process. For the most part, there is success with bail reform. We just want to make sure that there is fairness with the legal system, that someone committing one crime and another person committing the same crime get the same ability to get to their court case. One can pay the $500 and go home. The other cannot, sits in jail for a number of months, who knows.
Two things in the very few seconds that we have left. Cannabis, that you started your thought and I interrupted it.
Yes, so the cannabis industry, we legalized it. Every state is legalizing it now, and that's part reason why New York had to, because our neighboring states are doing so. And it's a lot of money in this industry. There are people that are using cannabis, safely, responsibly. And that should be an industry that we can see some revenue in. So unfortunately, when we legalized it, there was a lot of illegal shops opened, and there are a lot of stores right now selling illegally. And we're not seeing that give back to the state, the revenue from it to the state. So we did a lot in the budget this year to help our local law enforcement and municipalities padlock these businesses, continue due process, and put penalties if you're found to be selling illegally. Penalties meaning that you could lose your lotto, alcohol, and tobacco licenses in your bodega if you're caught selling illegally. And that could be detrimental to a lot of the business. So, we're showing that if you sell legally, you're going to get caught and it's going to hurt you. So don't do it.
Rapid fire, if you were not a senator, public servant, what would you be?
Oh my God. I mean, maybe a talk show host. I always said I wanted that.
It's a little overrated, but I like it. It's valid. Thank you, Senator, for
You're
being
welcome.
here today.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks everyone for watching. And remember, you can always watch this program anytime, anywhere, and also share it with others on BronxNet.org and also on YouTube. Also, make sure to follow BronxNet on social media to keep informed about who we'll be talking to next in this program. I am Javier Gómez. Until next time.